separating, and it's like a giant stretch mark, is sort of one way of thinking about it. And there were lots as North America separated from Europe. But that's sort of the big underlying picture of why there's a valley here and all. But then we're going to go much further ahead, and there have been multiple continental glaciations here. The last of which we had something that most of you know, right? We had Glacial Lake Hitchcock. But after the dam at Rocky Hill let go, it wasn't just like a bathtub. And basically, that was a long-held perception that the dam went out, and that failed, out went the water, right? It wasn't exactly like that. There was a tremendous amount of water that went out. But in our area here, we had a smaller lake called Glacial Lake Hadley. What we're seeing right here, what this lip is an old river terrace. But when you get further up into Northampton, including on the Smith College property, that's the lower delta for Glacial Lake Hadley. Then if you go up to Florence, and you're at St. Mary's Cemetery, and Spring Grove Cemetery, and JFK Middle School, that's the delta for Glacial Lake Hitchcock. So you've got multiple deltas here. You've got and then once Glacial Lake Hadley disappears, probably around 10,000, 11,000 years ago, then the Connecticut River and the Mill River comes cutting back and forth. So that for Northampton, for the early English, it had these vast meadows. It had higher bluffs to get up, and it had the Mill River, which was a source of power from like very short years after the Europeans were on. And the reason that the Europeans were they had, when the Massachusetts Bay Colony established around 1630, in short order, there were something like 20,000 people who came, immigrants. And so there's this great quote about they're like an overstocked hive, right? And they start moving out across the landscape. But in 1633, they decide, John Winthrop and others said, you know what, Connecticut River, it's a great river, a lot of nice stuff, but we can't go there because there are too many warlike Indians. But that same year, that's when a smallpox epidemic hits this area. Prior to the arrival of the Pilgrims, there was a major plague epidemic that really devastated the coastal populations. But there are some pretty terrible quotes by those early Puritans about how this plague has been providential and opened the landscape. So really, you see, 1633 comes, major smallpox epidemic here in the Connecticut River Valley. What happens? Wethersfield gets established, Hartfield gets established. 1636, you have Springfield, and this is an area where there's a lot of trading of furs. So people know about this area. By around 1650. Beaver populations have been so impacted, there are probably none here in the Connecticut River Valley. And so the only thing that the native people have to barter now to get those English goods, which they want, is the land itself. And so in 1654, they acquire, the English, first appeal to the general court, and then they buy from the native people 64,000 acres, including all these meadows. And the meadows, boy, that's what they want. And they've known about them for years. And so they originally lay out the home lots, and the home lots are all, I have a photograph, image of them here. And what we're on is a guy his name was Isaac Sheldon. And so this property, so here's the original home lots, which I will pass around. Here's King Street and Market Street and Hawley. So this is just downtown with the Mill River coming through in downtown Northampton. But basically, here's something that's pretty neat to look at. Here's Bridge Street. And let's see, does it show my guy? Well, here's Bridge Street Cemetery. So we're just a little bit further out. This was 1655 that this home lot became something. But basically, all these guys, they get 4 acres for a house and then they get meadowland, 15 acres, 20 acres, every single person. And what defines their lots, if you start looking at it, every lot gets a piece of land and they're up against a brook, right? So you get some drinking water and you get some land and then you get meadowland. And all the first home lots that were established were right here along the meadows. This was completely integrated and the most important part of the economy for early Northampton. Now, let's see, it's beginning to sprinkle. So, one of the things, you know, we think about, a lot of times you hear those old reports, Massachusetts all forested, New England's all forested, and there were big chunks of forest, but there were big places of clearings along these coastal areas and rivers. So this is an 1831 map, which you can pass around. Some of you probably have seen it before, but the meadows are immediately laid out by those first European settlers. And the names which you see on this map are the same names from the 1650s.
Wow.
And so we know, I mean, most of those early writings, there's a lot of things that aren't so reliable about them, but the meadows, there's repeatedly reference to these open meadows. And so the Native Americans were here, they were burning, they were clearing, they had these areas open. So
They kept them open by burning?
Burning. So that's why, like for instance, the early descriptions of Round Hill and many other locations is that it was perfect because they burned those areas for multiple reasons, but then you have grass coming up. So the English, who had cattle and other sheep, there was all this fodder out there. So
they also burned the woodlands.
That's
as
right.
well.
That's what I mean.
For hunting.
And so they could easily walk through the woods without all the pucker bush.
That's right. And so that's why on horseback you could just go through. All right, we really are going to walk, I promise. But so I just want to show you a couple things here because we're going to go down. So this is the meadows here, and here's where we are. We're right here on the edge, and this is something called Shepherd Island. Those of you, when you go across the bike trail, you might see Elwell Island.
Oh, yes.
The Shepherd Island, is that what we know as Mitch's Island?
Yes.
No,
No?
no, it's not.
You're right. That's where the...
No, Mitch's Island is a brand new island, pretty much. And so, Shepherd Island is no more an island anymore. And so, let me just show you. So this doesn't show the roads in there, but we're going to go. Some of you were on my memorable Memorial Day walk when we almost all got arrested. And so we don't have permission today from the landowner to go to Rainbow Beach, which is why, in part, we're going to go down on these private roads. So here's Shepherd Island from not too distant past, showing that it was an island, and now it's basically fused with the land. There's a channel. This is Rainbow Beach, and we're ultimately going to go down over here. But this, you can just imagine coming up around Mount Tom and then looking across the Arcadia Meadows, this vast open land. And I'm going to just so
What accounts for that? Just because of the flooding? Or, I mean,
So-
why?
why is
I
it?
mean, it's naturally meadows? Is
They
it a
were
nat-
farming it, I think.
The-
The
the-
Indians.
Yeah, the native,
Oh, okay.
The
So,
natives.
all right. Okay.
But-
So
but-
it was man created by humans.
yeah, but partly we're on the old glacial lake bed here. So if we dug way down below, we'd intercept glacial till and then sandstone.
But it was
So it's not river floodplain.
It is river floodplain. It is because the river.
But was it ever forested? Was
Well, probably not. but I mean, it might have been, but by the time the Europeans arrived here, the native people had burned it and cleared it. But they were here for at least 11,000 years.
Okay. So yes, they're still.
And agriculture came in at around 1,000 years ago. So okay, so just a couple pictures here. This is here's the same view. Some of you, so we are standing right over. Here's the farmland, the fairgrounds. So we're like right here. And one of the for me, like the sad things is that the Meadows were so integrated with Northampton. And now, in part because basically you start reading about it in the 1850s, where there's this agriculture begins to fall by the wayside. In the 1850s, Northampton was an industrial town. It was a silk city. And so agriculture was kind of going by the wayside. And so we have trees and we have buildings, and now, of course, we have 91, right? And we have a little bit of a dike, which we're going to loop around, or at least see. But you can see how dynamic this river, the Connecticut River, is. You can see these are all the places where the Connecticut River used to be, right? And there's right? And so I'm talking about a long period of time, right? Here's
Are those visible by airplane?
this is a 1995 map where we have in April where we have flooding, so you can really see the impact. I chose this one in particular. Now, so what I'd like to do today is not only show you the vastness of the Meadows, but a little bit of the floodplain forest.